I'm really, really excited to talk about this today. Joel and I both were nerding out about this a couple weeks ago and talking about how exciting it is to be in the community career path. Because we are such pioneers, this career has really only existed for about 20 years, and it's really only come into what it is today in the last 5 years. So all of us are really pioneers. We're kind of pushing the frontier and determining for ourselves where we want to go in our careers. So we can't just wait around for someone else to say, here's your exact ladder and exactly where you can go. But what we can do is carve out time for ourselves, think about what we really care about, where we want to get to, and really make this whole thing great for us and not just, fit into someone else's definition of what our career should be. So that's really exciting. And I also want to say that everything we're going to share, we're going to talk about what the career ladder that is kind of forming here, but what's right for one person is not necessarily right for the next person. So I do want to say that there is no shaming in wherever you are in your career. There's no shame if you don't want to one day be CEO. What's right for you is right for you. So with that, let's get started. I am Carrie Melissa Jones. I'm the founding partner and COO at CMX. I've been working on CMX for about 3 years now with David, and we have a fantastic team. And prior to that, I was building community at 2 different tech companies. And prior to that, I was in publishing, so quite the departure. And I've just been watching this whole community thing mature over the last couple of years, and it's been really, really thrilling. So Joel, I'll let you introduce yourself.
My name's Joel Connolly. I'm the head of community at Blackbird Ventures. We're a venture capital company in Australia. We got everything in the portfolio from SaaS companies to space we got satellites and 3D printing human cells. We got all kinds of stuff.
So cool.
Yeah, it's super great. It's a lot of fun. So I work with a whole bunch of founders. I work with the broader kind of ecosystem here, the startup ecosystem in Australia. And I also work with our investors, so our LPs. Prior to that, I was the founder and festival director of a craft beer festival here in Australia. We had no craft beer, and I got really excited about craft beer when I went to America. So came back home.
New things.
Yeah. I got a lot of hobbies. Anyway, so yeah, we started that and kind of just essentially built a festival and a movement around craft beer in Australia. So that was really fun. And before that, I was also an artist manager. So I used to manage bands. We had bands that if you're American, you may not know, but in Australia, we managed bands called the Rubens, who were like a platinum selling level artist, and a few others in there as well. So kind of community from way back, but I only really started calling it community about 18 months ago.
So cool. I think you're not alone in doing that. I will say that Joel he's an alumni of our CMX training program and has just really stood out to me since I met him on the internet about a year ago as someone who really dreams about his career and thinks about these things really intelligently. So I was so excited to ask him to talk with everyone here today. So
very kind. Thank you.
All right. So what are we going to be talking about on this webinar? We're going to be talking about the mindset that you need to cultivate in yourself in order to get ahead in this career path. Also, the community career pathways that have been kind of shaping themselves over the last 3 to 5 years. And then we're going to finish up with resources that you can use to level up in your career. And those are going to include both free as well as paid options so that you can take your education and your professional development into your own hands. And then, as I said, 20 minutes for just you to ask questions of us. Okay, so I'm actually going to do a little poll here. I'm curious what people's career aspirations are. So I'm going to open up the polling functionality. And all right. Can everyone see? You can see the career poll.
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, cool. So I would love everyone to vote on where they want to be in 5 years. What job title would you like to have 5 years from today? And there is an option for, I don't know, this is overwhelming and I want to hug a kitten. And that's also totally fine. Cool. I'll give you guys about, let's see, we've been doing 30 seconds, so about 10 more seconds to vote here. Still seeing votes come in.
Cool.
Looking at 75% have voted. Keep voting. We've got 6 more people need to vote. Click back into Zoom. Cool. So I will share these results now. Cool. So the top result is director or head of community, which is amazing. I'm glad that so many people are thinking of going in that direction. We've got 6 chief community officers. I like it. 4 VPs of community. 3 people plan to leave the community profession. Also nothing wrong with that. And 6 people who are here because this is overwhelming and they want to hug a kitten. There's also notably 0 people who say community managers. So you're all thinking about where you want to be after maybe where you are today or where you've already surpassed. And that's really, really exciting. So everyone's able to see that.
Ooh.
Those are the results.
Aspirational, I like it.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Yay. All right, so back to the webinar here. Let's see. All right. So what is the mindset that you need to have in order to really move your way up if you want to get this director of community title, if you want to get this VP of community title? The things that I have seen really stand out among the people who I've watched level up in their careers, especially over the last 3 years, are the attitude that they have, the direction that they have set for themselves, and then all of that kind of coming together in a personal career mission statement. So the attitude that I'm talking about that you need to cultivate in yourself is not just a positive attitude. That's some BS. And I'm actually a very cynical person personally, but it's about having an attitude of like, I take personal responsibility for my career. I'm not going to wait around for someone else to do this for me. And that also applies to how community works in your organization. I'm not just going to wait for someone to see the value of community. I'm going to forge the alliances that I need to forge. I'm not going to fault anyone for doing community wrong up to this point. It's now up to me. I can be the change maker. That's the attitude that you need to cultivate in your organization. And when you do that and you have the patience to see that through, that's when you see people move up the ladder. The second thing is having a clear direction. So knowing what your ideal job title is going to be. So for those of you who have that in mind already, fantastic. You're already well on your way. For those of you who are overwhelmed, you have time today to step back. You have plenty of time to carve this out, but to work for years and years and years without direction is a problem, right? You have to begin with the end in mind. So I think about some of the most inspiring community professionals that I know, people like Trish Fontanilla, she's at Freight Farms in Boston, Nikki Vesci at Transamerica's, and Erica Cool at Salesforce. These people all decided, I want to be director level or above. And now looking at Erica, for instance, she went from director to senior director to now VP of community at Salesforce, overseeing all these other teams. It's just so inspiring. And then finally, all of that is sort of cultivated in your mission statement. So like my personal career mission statement is I'm on a mission to help people sort of find their own inner resources. And the way that I happen to do that is I'm the COO of a company where I get to nurture other people, nurture the people that we serve, as well as our employees and contractors. And that's me personally. That's what works for me. But for everyone, it's going to be their own personal honed statement. So I'll turn it over to you, Joel, to talk about your own mindset and mission statement.
Yeah, well, I really just want to echo a lot of that stuff. So, I think, to be completely mission driven in what you're doing is the only way to really, really advance your career. And for me specifically, when I started at Blackbird about a year and a half ago, there wasn't a super clear idea of what the role would be. So I started as like community. They didn't really know what to call me and they wanted me to run an event. And then outside of that, there wasn't really much direction. And so I kind of really had to take a step back and, ask myself, not just what, I wanted to achieve in community at Blackbird, but really what Blackbird was trying to achieve overall, like what our ultimate mission would be. We didn't have one at the time. Like it wasn't written on the walls anywhere. We had, we had like a feeling, like people kind of had an idea of what we were trying to do, but we'd never really sat down and discussed it. So we ran a whole session around it, like I ran a values and mission session, in order to, really put down in concrete what it was that Blackbird was trying to achieve. And so what we came to in that was, our mission is to supercharge Australia's most ambitious founders. And from there, that enabled me to really kind of deeply understand where Blackbird was going, which then enabled me to develop a mission for community. Now, the way that I approach it is that I want the community function to be absolutely like integral to Blackbird's success. Like, we shouldn't be able to achieve our mission without the input of, and without, you know, community as a function. So that led me to building Blackbird's community mission statement, which was to turn Blackbird into a magnetic force for the very best founders. And what that means is that each time I'm going to do anything, a new program, a new, like, if I'm sending out a tweet or if I'm running a conference or whatever, everything has to link back into that major kind of mission statement, which is to turn Blackbird into a magnetic force for the best founders. Now, my aim is that over time, what I'll be able to prove out with this role, and again, because the path isn't created for me, like I have to carve the path myself. So what I hope over time is that through this work that Blackbird's, like, that the community becomes so important to Blackbird achieving our overall mission that, you know, my career path will, you know, it'll be set on a trajectory that just, you know, it'll kind of take care of itself, honestly, like if I'm able to achieve what I think I'm able to achieve. So I guess in summary, yeah, just being completely mission driven and mission focused, which is not, like, it can be difficult, you know, as someone in community when you're, you know, at one level, like, I'm thinking about this stuff, like, how are we going to, you know, how are we going to attract the best founders in Australia to Blackbird? But then I'm also scheduling out tweets for the week, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's the macro and the micro together. But I think underpinning everything by having that mission, you know, core to what I'm doing and everything that, you know, all the programs that I run, I'm making myself, like, indispensable to Blackbird.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of, you know, that's just it. Like I said, mission driven, and, you know, make community like a function that just cannot be done without at Blackbird.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. I mean, I love what you say about, like, you did this with the founders. It's not like you just decided your mission in isolation. You actually led a session on mission and vision. And that's you're at a small company, so you're able to just initiate that meeting. Some people at a giant company maybe can't do that. But there's certainly, like, with your boss, with your colleagues, peers, definitely ways that you can get buy-in on your mission.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that. So it is true. Like, I work and this is part of working at a startup. Now, we still consider ourselves a startup. There's only 6 of us here. It's really easy for me to sit down and have those conversations one-to-one with the people who actually run the company. But yeah, I think, you know, you can still take the same approach in a larger organization. You just have to, you know, if your department is one department within a department within a department within another department, then you really just got to focus on, like I say, the micro of that. So your mission might be, you know, you might have an overall company mission right at the top, then each department likely has an overall objective. And so you should be, like, working to make sure that your community strategy and your community programs achieve those objectives that are directly above you.
Absolutely.
Keeping in mind the overall mission, but it is possible. It's just like I say, it's a longer road.
Yeah.
But it's all about making yourself and the work that you do just an integral part of the success of the people that you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing that I see happen to a lot of, especially entry-level community managers, is that they're hired to build a community just for a community's sake. And what they really need to do is make themselves indispensable, a lot of times at these larger companies, to one department at a time. Unless your community is your product, like, for instance, in Yelp or in Airbnb, usually if you're looking at, like, Erica Kuhl's career trajectory, for instance, you know, starting out, making yourself indispensable to the support organization or the marketing or operations, how can you streamline things and listen to what people are saying about, like, their pain points internally that community can solve for them. So if it's a product team and they're saying, we can't get enough beta testers and we can't get our beta testers to stick around, well, as a community manager, you can start to solve that problem for them. So it's about, like, choosing where you want to level up and then making yourself invaluable in those organizations.
And the whole point of that is that it's up to you. Like, it's, you know, you gotta, if you just let it, if you're passive about it, like, if I had been passive coming into Blackbird, I would be just scheduling social content. Like, that's what I'd be doing. You got to hit that right on the head, you know, even though that's part of my job, like, it's how I do what I do. It's not what I'm doing. And so, and if you don't, like, especially, like, people just don't, like, there's not a mature understanding of what the community function can be and the potential of it in most organizations, like still most people now, I don't know if anyone else says this, but when I explain what I do to people, I say community at the top of it, but then I always have to put in these clarifying statements.
Totally. Yeah.
Really to try and, get them to understand that it is more just, it's more than social content or whatever. Like it's, it's way more to it than that. So if you get yourself into a position where you're in an organization and that's what they perceive that you're going to be able to do is like their content management basically, or, something else, which is a legitimate part of community. But like I say, it's kind of how you do what you do, not, what you're actually doing. You got to hit that on the head right away and really like start asking those deeper questions. Like, what are the really big problems here? What's our absolute mission? What are we trying really, really hard to achieve? And in what way can community get us to that point? Mm-hmm. And we have this advantage of being like, the community has this really great like numerical advantage in that we can get like numbers really, really quickly that show almost, they're not vanity metrics, but you can see right away, like if you do a bit of content or you run an event or you do whatever, you can say, well, I had 200 people show up to this thing. That's 200 people that were right in front of us straight away. So the impact of things can be like, you can see it quite quickly and very, very clearly. Whereas some other things, you got to like correlate a whole bunch of other different pathways around to prove that what you're working. But, you can use those things, I think. Well, that's what I do anyway. I use those numbers that to me, I know are just indicators of my success. They're not showing, that I've completed, the overall mission. They're indicating that I've gotten there. But you show those things to other people and it really helps them get behind you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So next, we're going to talk about some of the pathways. I'm really excited to talk about these because I actually did a ton of data digging for this, and I'm going to share some data that I've never shared anywhere else before. So that's really exciting. So before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. And the fact that you're here today means that you're on a community pathway, right? But I actually thought about putting a poll for this question as well. Like, what was your career before you were a community professional? And I started writing out some of the options, and I realized I would have to have 100 possible designations, and that's not really possible to do in a couple seconds. So really, I mean, what I say all that because there's no clear pattern for how people get here. I've done the research, I've looked into our database, there's just really no pattern, but we all end up here and we're all here today. So now we have to all get on the same page and follow a trajectory together. So if we want to do that, we have to know where we can get to. So here's the sort of career ladder that our data shows us from looking at the CMX Hub members group on Facebook. People starting out at community intern, assistant, or associate. A lot of times people won't even start here. They'll actually start at the community manager job title, but then they'll move up into senior community manager, then to director or head of community, then to VP of community, and then on to, very few people are there yet, but onto the C-suite. But that's where we can get to. And I want to say that this position can uniquely be one that preps people to run companies, quite honestly, because you can be valuable to so many different pieces of the organization. You can be core to the organization, and that makes you, again, uniquely valuable, and it means that you can see the big picture from all these vantage points. And that's sort of like how I see us going eventually, is a lot of community managers will one day be CEOs. And that's my challenge to you here. So at the bottom here, there's a bit.ly link, and we do actually have CMX. We have a resource for it. Breaks down like what are some of the skill sets you might need in each of these roles, how many years of experience do the people who hold these roles typically have, et cetera, et cetera. So you can dive into that later. But here's where we are today. Looking at, I looked at 2,800 and my face is covering the number, 2,856 data points from our CMX member group. And this is how we're broken down today. So about 3% of our members are that community intern, assistant, or associate level. 22% are at the community manager level. So that's not really surprising that we have a lot more people who have been doing this for 1 to 5 years, and they typically have that community manager title. Then we have quite the drop off of just 3% at the senior community manager level. Then we have 12% at director or head of community, 1% only at VP of community, and actually 2.6% in the C-suite. So that includes founders as well, who kind of are in the C-suite by default, right? And I want to point out two relevant things here. First, that yes, there is a small number of VPs of community, especially. That should not be surprising to you, but it should be an opportunity, because obviously, if this career path has really only materialized in the last 5 years, there's not a lot of people who have been in it long enough to become that VP of community title. In addition, there's very few, I should say, job postings that go up like, we're looking for a VP of community, or like even headhunters who are looking for VPs of community. That's just not done yet. So what needs to happen is that internal evangelism to carve out that role. Again, going back to Erica Kuhl of Salesforce's example, that VP of community position at Salesforce did not exist. There was never a job posting for it. She just made herself so indispensable to so many departments at Salesforce that the role was made for her. And she started out actually, she started out in training and development, but she was the director of community there for quite some time. Then she moved into senior director of community and then became VP of community. Another opportunity I want to point out is this senior community manager job title. There's very few of them actually in our group, and it makes me very much wonder if there should be more, because many people have had the community manager job title for 2 to 3 years, and part of their like annual negotiation, if you have that, or just asking for, next time you have a salary conversation or something like that, also ask for that job title change. Ask for, can I get a senior in front of my name? I've been doing this for 2 to 3 years. I'm the most senior person on the team, perhaps. That can actually, it can go a long way, especially if you're looking to shift roles in the future into a different company. And then I also want to point out that, yes, there's a small number of people at these VP and C-suite levels and director levels even, but they're there. And that means that you can find them and you can ask them to mentor you, or just simply watch them. That's what I do. I just observe people because I'm an introvert. I just like to see, like, how does this person conduct themselves? How do they present themselves? How do they get the visibility that they need? And that's how I learn best. So yeah, it's exciting stuff.
I love the idea of that. I really think that VP of community, I think you're totally right. I just don't think that profession's been around long enough, I think. And if I'm honest, like a lot of people that I meet in community are, they're kind of waiting for those things to just get created for them, which, I totally agree with you. I echo that. Like, I think that, while it's also like a challenging part to create those roles for yourself and to create them within the organization, it's also an incredible opportunity. You're the one who gets to set the standard and set the bar for it before you jump into it. So completely.
Yeah. And strangely, getting that to happen is really about telling other people like how much value you can create for them. So it's not like, oh, I want this. I'm so confident that the value that I can bring is going to shift this entire company, that this only makes sense for you to reward me with this title and salary bump.
Goes back to that mission-driven thing, I reckon. Yes. Like, you just, if you do that, if you create like a role that is so integral to the company, and you prove that, you're helping everyone move towards that mission, then, those roles will get created for you down the line. Like, you'll actually be able to, invent those things for you as you build out your team and build it up.
Yeah, nobody's looking to just increase their headcount and pay you more money. I guarantee it. And I wanted you to talk a little bit through your own career path and where you see yourself going in the future, Joel, because it's really inspiring to see that you've already kind of thought about where you want to be.
Yeah. So I left university and I started off working, just doing like arts programs and events and things, and it was in a local government, and it wasn't that inspiring. And I was really into music at the time, so a friend and I started what we thought was like a record label, but what turned into be the job we were doing was actually artist management. And so we started doing that and, built that company up over a bunch of years, and we added a few different components to that company. So like we had a PR business, an events company, and an artist management all under the umbrella. We did that for like a whole bunch of years. And then, like I mentioned before, midway through that, I kind of came into craft beer world, and that was really like one of the kind of turning points for me in terms of community building. What I realized is that I came back here just out of a personal desire to, create or to meet more people who liked craft beer. I came back to Australia looking for a way to kind of meet those people, and I found that there just wasn't anything out there. Like, you couldn't go to a pub and get a good beer, or you couldn't really, it was really difficult to find. And so I, started this little festival, which was just a few events at first, and met a couple of people who I thought were interested in it. And from that, by meeting a couple of people that were just really, really, really believed in this thing, we were able to create this mini movement in Sydney. And then that turned into, 12 events all the way to by the end, we had 150, 160 events in a week in Sydney.
Wow.
And that was the reason that we did that over a couple of years. And the reason that we're able to do that is because we built this community, people who were just so passionate about it. And, in January, so the festival's in October, in January, Facebook groups would pop up with people starting to take their week off, work, and they'd be asking for dates so that they could get their annual leave approved.
Wow.
And that was really one of the first, that in parallel with my artist management work. So I was seeing the impact that, a band could have on a large group of people. And that's slightly different. I think the fan relationship is different to fan and artist relationship is different to community. But within that, if you dig down, there's this idea of super fans, and you have maybe 150 people who are definitely in a community, and who, the band is a vehicle for all these other things that they do together. And for
a whole other webinar.
A sense of belonging, place to share experiences with other people, all these things that are really great in community. So the beer thing, along with that artist management work happening in parallel, kind of really opened my eyes up to just how powerful community work could be within all kinds of business. And I started to think about what else, what other businesses are there that could use community, or that have community as a core kind of part of what they do. And what I found is that there's a lot of people in Australia particularly weren't talking about it. There's not, there weren't really any jobs that had the word community in the title. And I know we talk about people in the US being a few years, still in the infancy of the career, but in Australia, it's even, there's only a handful of us doing it at the moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, those two things led me to a point where I just kind of, we had success with both of those, and I was looking for something new to do. And I kind of felt like moving on from the arts. And that's when I kind of I met, my now boss, his name's Nicky, and he introduced me to the rest of the company. And the idea of startups and technology really got me excited. And he pitched me on the way that they told me that I could come in and do the work, and they got me excited about it, was to say that, Australia historically has, we've built our economy and our prosperity and our wealth off of things that we dig out of the ground. We've got a lot of natural resources here, but those resources are finite, that they're not doing that much, good to the world, in the long term. And we need to, if we're to continue our prosperity in Australia and to, maintain it, then we need to find another way to, we need something else, that works and that drives the economy for, all the generations that are going to come after us. So it was a huge mission, right? He's like, we're going to change the direction of Australia. We do that through innovation and through technology and through startups.
Mm-hmm.
But what that really was at the time, like I mentioned before, they needed someone really quickly to help them run this conference, which is, you can see behind me, the Sunrise Conference. Anyway, so I came on board, and, I talked a little bit about, how I then approached, the strategy and building community into an important function with the Blackbird. So I went through all of that process, and what I've come to realize now is that, this thing that I'm building, this community work that I'm doing, is center to everything that we do here. We don't get deal flow if we don't have a really great community. Our founders, who we've already invested in, won't recommend us to other founders if we don't have a strong community within our portfolio.
Yeah.
The overall ecosystem won't grow and develop if we don't contribute back into it and build the startup community, within Sydney. And that means we don't get deal flow. That means that, this overall mission that we had to move Australia forward, it means we can't do that. So I realized just how important community can be within this. So what I've been thinking about recently is, I'm sort of on my way. I've got a little bit more work to do in terms of turning community into that central function within Blackbird. I'm on my way, but I'm a one-man band at the moment. And so the next steps for me are to build out, to prove within the resources and the space that I have that community is as important as I know it is. Then from there, I'm aiming to build a team of people, and I'll start, as they say, giving my Legos away and start to peel off some of those other community functions, and maybe even spread community out into different departments. So we've got a portfolio community, we've got an ecosystem, startup ecosystem, we've got our LPs. They all form one big community, but I can split that out from there.
Yeah.
And from there, I have this vision to turn, to build up that community function within the business, to add other pieces to it. And then eventually I'm hoping to get to partner level, which is the same as, my bosses, they're both partners. Mm-hmm. So in BC, it's partner as well. General partner is at the top, and then partner, and then you go down below there. But you can have these things like operational partners, so people that don't actually do investing, but that are, at partner level, making strategic decisions about the whole business.
Cool.
And yeah, anyway, that's a long way to get to it, but that's kind of my vision for it.
Yeah, I know. I love how ambitious it is. That's awesome. So just a really quick overview of what skills do you need as you level up in your career? None of this should be super surprising. I'm not going to go into this at a really deep level, but obviously when you first start your career, it's much more about being tactically effective. Can you execute? Can you manage your time? Are you productive? Can you make your manager look like they're the hero in the situation? Is essentially your job when you're first starting your career, which can be frustrating. And as you move up into the director level and head of community level, it becomes much more about managing operations, making data-driven decisions. I would say that that's probably the number one weakness that I see in a lot of community professionals, even who make it to the director level, just still aren't making the kinds of data-driven decisions that they need to be making about, why community should be invested in. Can we prove the value of it? And if so, what is that value? And then as you get into the VP and beyond, it's much more about strategy and leadership. So if you really love the nuts and bolts of community building, getting to the VP and beyond level might not be for you, but it might also be for you because as you become a leader in your organization, you might have already noticed that your organization is a community as well. So it's about, being that sort of diplomat inside of your community, inside of your company, instead of inside of your community. I manage that by having my own side projects. And so I still build community on the side, even though a lot of the work that I do for CMX these days is not about the tactics of community building, which was a big wake-up call for me about 2 years ago. So these are some of the things that you can do to level up, or some of the areas you can level up in order to move your way forward. And you might have noticed that the data I provided was only about 44% of our members. So what about the other 56.4%? I saw quite a few of you saying, I want to leave community one day. So what are some of the other professions people are going into? These were the most popular ones that I saw from our members. It either means that they have moved from community into these job titles or job roles, or they do these jobs and they use a community lens to do their jobs. So that includes things like content and marketing roles. There's CMOs, there's directors of content in our group, all kinds of people who love getting community stories and translating those into usually marketing value. Instructors and teachers, we have a huge number of professors actually in our group, and I think that's because this is such a hot topic right now academically. So if you wanted to go into research, that's definitely an option. Product and design, we have quite a few people who are product managers and who want to hone their skills into that direction. We have obviously a good number of entrepreneurs, because being an entrepreneur is all about community building and listening to your customers and bringing them together. We have digital strategists, and then there's a good number of people who are also in operations focused roles as well. There's a lot of moving parts in communities, and so it's a great way to get your feet wet. I
love it. It seems like if this happens, it looks like community is going to just be this virus that goes through all
I'm glad you like my graphic. It's true. That's why I say that community builders are wonderfully poised to run companies, because they truly are. Like they just can see things from so many different vantage points. So, okay, so if you do want to take your community career to the next level, what are some resources you can use to level up in your career? So I have put a heavy emphasis here on informal learning, just because I know that a lot of community managers don't have giant professional learning and development budgets, which I think needs to change, because if we do want to make our way up in our careers, we need to invest in our learning. But in the meantime, there's plenty of free resources that you can access if you don't have a giant budget. So here's a whole list of books. Gary Vaynerchuk obviously has a lot of books that touch on sort of community-esque topics. His mindset is really what I think is critical in his writing. The Culting of Brands from Douglas Atkin, that was one that Joel recommended. Sapiens, about the history of humankind. And then down to like Crucial Conversations is the last one. I actually just discovered this book recently, and it's about conflict management, and it can be extremely well applied to online communities where there's a ton of conflict. There's also huge webinar libraries and podcasts that you can access for free. So Vanilla Forums has a ton of old webinars that you can find. So does Salesforce. Community Manager Hangouts, which is through mycmgr.com, has a huge back catalog of, they used to do weekly Hangouts on Google Hangouts, and I think they only do them once a month now, if that. But you can find all kinds of information through their website. There's also 2 podcasts that I know of, the Community Pulse podcast by Mary Thingvall and Jason Hand, and the Community Signal podcast by Patrick O'Keefe. In addition to that, there's also a ton of web guides out there that you can access for free. Those include Building Blocks by Mac Fogelson, the Community Toolbox. This is something that I discovered a few years ago. It's from the University of Kansas, and it's extremely helpful, especially if you work for a nonprofit, because that's what this Community Toolbox is actually geared toward. But it's helpful for any kind of community builder, and it runs through all kinds of resources and ways of thinking that when I discovered it, I was like, oh, this is like the hidden treasure of community building. So definitely check that out. Evan Hamilton obviously has a fantastic blog. I believe it's evanhamilton.com. And then Stack Exchange has their own community management forum that you can access. And just taking a look at how Stack Exchange is run is also fascinating from a community perspective. Also, there's many tools that you can learn, and there's YouTube videos you can access to learn how to use these tools, but these are the tools that I think are the most important to learn right now, and those include Salesforce and other CRM tools. Salesforce, I will talk about this more in just a second, but they have a resource called Trailhead, and that's all free learning that you can access about how to use Salesforce, how to use Salesforce Community Cloud, all kinds of stuff. There's also Google Analytics. Learning how to do conversion tracking is so important if you want to start making data-driven decisions. That might not apply to you depending on how your web app or website is set up, but something like Google Analytics, maybe it's a different application, but to understand how to track conversions. Learning about SEO is extremely crucial. SQL and understanding how to query various databases, so you can see like an action in this part of the web app might fuel community value in this way. So that's learning how to do SQL queries is pivotal. And it never hurts to take a couple coding classes, and there's so many resources for these now, just so that you can speak to the developers who tend to work, especially if you're at a tech company, tend to work on the products and even on the platform that your community is built on. I also am a huge fan of experiential learning. So if you can't level up in the ways that you need to at your job to get, like, you want to be a director of community, but your team is just telling you that you should only be doing content management, for instance, like running your Twitter feed, you can run your own community. No one is stopping you. It's the beauty of the internet. So run your own blog, start your own Facebook group. I think I have like 7 Facebook groups myself, and my most recent one is like for people sewing dog apparel. Start a forum, start a meetup group. This is another thing that I'm a huge fan of. It's so low barrier to entry. Just gather people on a regular basis, and that's a great way to expand your skills. Also volunteer for others. So political campaigns are a great place to learn about how to run a volunteer program, or how to create a movement, essentially. volunteering for other people's groups, and then CMX Series, which is our local meetup offering for people all across the world. And Joel's doing one tonight in Sydney. You can volunteer for those teams or become a series organizer in your city so that you actually can understand what it's like to build something from the ground up yourself. It's frustrating and amazing at the same time. And then there's also formal training and events. And this is where I'll do like a slight push for CMX training. We have our summer session coming up on July 31st. So that's in a week, 2 Mondays from now. And it's 6 weeks of intensive training where you can really step back and get a handle on your strategy so that you can start to think bigger picture, not only about your community, but also about your career. And we only do that in a cohort once a year, so it's going to be extremely powerful. But you can enroll any time of year, actually, in our on-demand training. In addition, there's CMX Summit and Series. So going to conferences and meeting people and finding mentors can really change the game for you. There's also CLS, so that's Community Leadership Summit. That's by Jono Bacon, and it happens once a year. It just happened in Austin in May. That's another conference you can attend. Swarm, which is down in Australia, is a community conference. I think it's coming up. Do you know, Joel?
Yeah. I think it's in August. I have to check the dates.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's another place where you can go find people who are doing this work and start to develop yourself in that way. And then we support, if you're in New York City, is great, as is CMX Series in New York City. And again, Salesforce Trailhead. I've been using it for all kinds of stuff, including like our goal setting at CMX. There's all kinds of tutorials in there. So it's really, really powerful.
And I'll just, if I can just, jump in there and reiterate just how important we did the CMX training session last year, and just how it was just so important to the work that I ended up going on to do, and all the stuff I've talked about creating creating a community function that's integral to the business. So the values and the vision and the mission session that I ran for the company, that all came out of the CMX course. And a lot of the overall strategy that I've built has been, off that framework that I learned within the course. So yeah, I really, really highly recommend it.
Thanks. Oh, that warms my heart. Cool. So I did want to ask you too, because you got buy-in to join the course. You've also gotten buy-in to fly all the way to San Francisco and now Los Angeles to attend CMX Summit. How do you actually get buy-in from your team to invest in your professional development?
So, I'll start off by saying that I'm pretty lucky I work in a place where, the people believe that community is really important. We're still, they're eager to really see evidence of it. And, I'm showing them evidence every single week, but there's always more work to do. But that being said, the buy-in for the course, like I said to them, the way that I did that was that I told my bosses, I was like, look, this is goes over 5 or 6 weeks. If I dedicate an hour or so a day, I'll be able to then build this overall strategy and get a clearer idea of what the overall community function should be within Blackbird. And that was the big sell, because at that point there wasn't any strategy around it. So I said to them, look, it's a small investment. You've invested in me. If you invest another $700 or whatever US, whatever it is, we'll actually be able to come out of this with a framework. So putting it in that context was pretty easy. But then everything after that, they continually reinvest in my education and training, because I did the course and because that proved to be so valuable. So Nikki, one of my bosses, said last year, when I asked if I could go to the summit, he was he just sent back his email in all caps saying, absolutely, the course was the best thing you did last year. It was the most valuable thing that you did for the company last year, which, because of that, we came up with our vision and our mission. And then the strategy for community was built out of that. So once I got that first thing done and I pitched it in that way that, small investment for large reward, everything since then, because I've been able to turn all of those opportunities into something pretty powerful for Blackbird, everything since then has been a really easy discussion. But, I should point out importantly that, I didn't just do these things just hoping that I'd get given some magic, sparkle dust that would turn everything into magic. I had to sit down and really, really figure out how I was going to get the most out of all of these things. And then that has made it subsequently really, really easy to talk them into, continuing to reinvest in me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to, it's like any class you take, right? Where you get out what you put in to the class.
So I went in with, this is helpful for me, and I did this at the conference last year as well, the summit. I went in and said, right, what are the 3 burning questions that I have, like the 3 things that I really, really need to understand or want answers to or want to come away with. So with the course, I was like, I really want to come out with like a framework that I can build our strategy upon. Because I feel like I've been doing this just off my own intuition for years. I feel like I want a framework that'll allow us to build a strategy. So for my bosses, it was a way for me to say, this is the money you're paying, and directly out of this, you'll get a community strategy that we'll be able to use for years. And with the conference, it was the same thing. I said, okay, I want to go to this conference. Here are the 3 questions that I have that I'm going to get answers to, like really, really big things, like how do we measure, what we're doing, things like that. So that was, I don't know if that will be helpful for everybody, but that was super helpful for me.
Yeah, like having clear takeaways when you say, like, I want you to invest in this, and here's the 3 things I can see getting out of it is really important.
Come back with. So then it becomes like they can really clearly correlate, the money that they're spending on the outcome, which is what every bosses want to do that. Yeah,
totally. All right. So with that, we ran a little bit over, but we want to open it up for your questions now, areas that you want to get advice on. And I also want to share with you that because you sat through the last 50 minutes of learning with us, that you now have access to a special discount code for the training session that Joel was just talking about. So that's a 15% discount. It's about it's actually $100 off. And we've never actually offered a discount like that before. So this is only available until Friday. But if you do sign up, you'll get the best discount we have so far given, and you'll get access to an entire cohort of your fellow students on July 31st. So I really hope that we see you there. But also, now we're going to open it up to the audience to ask us questions. So let's see what we got.
So there's some on Facebook too, if you'd like me to read.
Sure.
So, well, just there's 2 on Facebook. The first one is from Carmen, and she said she's wondering how many companies, this was about the career path that you laid out, Carrie, that had all the way to the C-suite.
Yeah.
How many companies have this career path? And I've worked in social media for more than 10 years, and for a variety of Fortune 500 companies, these jobs simply don't exist. When I meet a VP of community or social media, they agree that these roles are rare, and the advice they generally give is that you should be more of a generalist or a marketer. So I think that goes back to what we were talking about before. It's true, like these jobs don't exist now. No one can hand this to you. But that, even though that sounds like that in of itself is a great opportunity, you have the ability to define and create something like this within your organization and to be the first one there. And so I think it's really important that you don't, sit back and look at the existing structure of an organization and try and plot how you can just move through the way that it, currently exists. I think that you should be asking yourself how you can take this new kind of community thing that's happening, how you can introduce it to your organization, and how you can then turn it into a vital part of it. Then you will be at the front of that queue. No one else is going to be, you've led it, so you'll be at the very top. And, you can work for 20 years to get up to the C-suite, or you can maybe do a concentrated effort over 5 years to reintroduce something like this to the company. And I think that you could get there, much, much quicker if that's what your goal is.
Yeah, no, I would just reiterate that and say too that what a lot of companies are concerned about today is this idea of digital transformation. And that sounds kind of absurd if you work at a startup, especially in the tech space, but these larger companies that move very slowly do actually have to make huge digital transformations, and the entire core of their company has to shift, and it will shift over the next 20 to 50 years. Like, can you even imagine what a company like Coca-Cola might look like in 50 years? It's hard for me to wrap my head around it. But if you were working there, you would be thinking about that every single day. How can I be part of this transformation? Is community going to be part of that? If it is, I want to be at the center of that. If it's not, I should also be realistic about that.
Imagine how great it would have been to be around when the internet was being invented. Imagine just starting to come of age and start working when this new thing called the internet was around. I'm not suggesting that community necessarily is as big as that, but it's the similar kind of thing. We're at a time where, this thing is just sort of starting to mature and become a part of, what organizations consider to be, a part of the way they do business. And we're at the beginning of that. only happens once in your life. You only get to be at the beginning of like one or maybe two things, or at the start of it. So I think it's super exciting and like a massive opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I don't know why this made me think about The Great Gatsby, but I'm a huge literature nerd. But yeah, it is like this frontier, and at some point that frontier ends.
Yeah.
Do you want to be like way late on the bandwagon, or do you want to be here with us as we carve this out? And that's a decision that you do have to make for yourself. Like if you want to go down the marketing path and become a CMO one day, there's nothing wrong with that, and you should do that. But you know, we're just taking a little bit of a different perspective here, and it will take a lot of work. That's not that's not a lie. It's going to take a lot of convincing, honestly, a lot of political work inside of organizations to like get buy-in, be diplomatic. Like I can't even understand how a lot of politicians do what they do, but that's what a lot of us have to do too, is like be political about these things. Like, how can I do favors for this department and that department? But don't be sleazy about it, you know, be a good person. So I hope that answers that question. And yes, those roles do not exist much today, but they are out there. They're in our community.
The next question, I don't know if you can see these, Carrie, or I'll just keep going through them, is from Angela, and she's asking about the training. She said, is this training different from the CMX fundamentals course you have on demand?
Yeah, it's not. So Angela, you've been through it, and you're good to go. This is just a cohort so that it'll be about 50 people doing it all at the same time. So the value in that is that you have people by your side, and we're also going to keep you a lot more accountable than we normally do. And we'll be launching more training in the future as well. We just launched our membership program. So our founding membership program will be developing content specifically for those members fairly soon. So there will be more to learn from. But yes, this is.
I'll do an advanced course if you put one out, or a different course.
Yeah, we definitely, this is like, it's 101, but if you have never learned the fundamentals before, it's still helpful to go back and figure out where your gaps are. There's definitely a need for a 201 from here. So.
Next question we have up is from Brady, who said, I feel like this is a classic question, but how do you effectively measure your success? Or does it depend on the functional area of your company you are building community for?
Yeah.
I have an answer for this. I'm sure you do as well, Carrie.
Yeah. Oh, did I just stop sharing? Are you able to see my slide still?
I can see your screen.
Okay.
There we go.
I lost it.
So for me, like, I spent about 8 months on this, like trying to work out, what is the most effective way to measure the success of the community work that I'm doing? And it's a really difficult question because, so take our mission, and that's to be a magnetic force. Well, sorry, my mission is to be a magnetic force for the best founders, and Blackbird's is overall to be, to supercharge Australia's most ambitious founders. So I can run a whole bunch of I can develop a strategy, and I can say, well, I want to achieve that mission. I'm going to do that through running these community programs. So for example, the Sunrise Conference that we run is all about encouraging people to take an interest in startups, to, light some fires, to get people excited about technology. And to do that by telling a whole bunch of founder kind of origin stories, essentially. So what I can do is I can measure the success of that conference, right? I can go in and look at how many people attended. I can survey them all and get an NPS off it. But let's say then in 8 months or 12 months, we see an increase in Blackbird's deal flow. There is no neat way to draw a line between the Sunrise Conference and that increase in the number of companies that we've seen. So we can say that there is a correlation, but we can't prove causation. And so that's something that was actually a realization that I came to after going to the CMX conference. And no one else says this, so I might be wrong. And maybe your bosses don't want to hear it, but I think you waste your time trying to spend, you spend your life trying to prove these this neat line between it. Rather, what I focus my effort on is saying, well, this is the strategy that I'm doing, and these are the programs I'm going to run tactically to help me achieve that strategy. I want to know that the program is successful. So, one really big thing for me, I'm really big on NPS. And so we might, after a conference or an event or a piece of content, might say, based on this event or based on this whatever, would you recommend Blackbird to a friend or colleague? And that's an indication, and I can see then, I can get a temperature check on how people are viewing us. But there still isn't, that still doesn't show me directly that I have, increased the deal flow directly into Blackbird. We can see the deal flow is increasing, but no real way to prove that. So I don't know if anyone has a different answer, but I think that you can get caught up trying to like prove that absolutely. But I actually believe that proving that your programs are effective and that they're going towards achieving your strategy, I think that's enough.
Yeah. So I think that can be a really powerful place, especially with where you're at right now in building this thing for the very first time. You don't start out with causation necessarily. You start out by just trying things and tracking them. And like you said, putting out the NPS survey after the conference, you can say the conference did this. But when we're looking at how to measure success, there's really 3 types of metrics that people need to be tracking as community builders. Those are just the regular content metrics. So like, how many viewers are you getting on your blog if you do manage a community type of a blog or something like that, or on your community platform pages, or how many people showed up to my event. And then engagement, which is like, how healthy is the community? Are people actually taking actions there? Are people actually engaging there? And if so, that engagement should point back to some business value metric. So is it lowering the cost per acquisition for your sales team, for instance? Or is it retaining customers that you otherwise might have lost? So those business value metrics are the most important thing for you to eventually get to. And that's going to vary based on the functional area that your community works inside of, or the overarching mission of your company. So for you, for Blackbird, it's all about deal flow. That's extremely important. But for, say, like a services business, right, take CMX, for instance, we're a services business. For us to be able to calculate that our community efforts are lowering the cost per acquisition for new students or new members, or for our sponsors, that is extremely important. So if we can say we put out, I'm trying to think of like our CMX series events. Actually, right now we're working on calculating, do these people go into our funnel? Do they end up signing up for training? Do they end up attending CMX Summit events? So also, your cost per acquisition is not something that you can usually determine in isolation. It's a company-wide or sales-wide metric, but like nobody really owns that necessarily. Or if they do, like, we're all a team, right? So for you, it's like the whole company is mobilized around deal flow and like getting the right companies in the door to work with Blackbird. Everyone should be invested in these shared goals. And I think the way that a lot of companies work is there's this like back and forth, like who owns which metric and who gets to say that they have, the most influence on it. And to me, that's like really bad company culture. And also, you are the change maker if this is the route you want to go down. And if so, like, how do you want to have community be part of determining these metrics? It doesn't have to just be about you. That's your ego. It's like, what can your team accomplish together? So there's a huge report on this that we put out earlier this year called the 2017 Community Value and Metrics Report. If you go just Google that, the CMX 2017 Metrics and Value Report, and you will find a 40-page report on how companies today are measuring the success of their communities.
Cool.
So it's a long-winded answer, but
good answer though. It's one of the things that people struggle the most with. I think every community person I meet with talks about this, like how do we effectively measure and prove the value? Super important. I think they're like, to echo you, I think every company is different, but yeah, I feel it. I feel you.
Yeah.
So do we have time? We got time for a few more?
We're over time, but we talked a little bit over. So if people don't mind staying, we will answer these and record the answers so that people can get access.
So the next one is Chris, who is a Blackbird founder.
Yay!
Question is, so I can work with you on this offline. I'll let you get Carrie to answer this because she's a genius. So I can work with you offline, but basically his question was, how do you go from 0 to 1 and starting work on a community, or how can you test the waters before getting full buy-in and going hard?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I think it's our responsibility to test the waters before just going out there and saying, we have a solution for you. I think especially so there's so many free tools now that allow you to do this. Like whether it's a Facebook group is a great way of testing the waters, as is Slack. These are both free options that you can say, like, let's start this thing, invite people to it, and see if they're actually interested. It's all about just getting that early validation. And so I think it's just putting stuff out there and then asking for feedback all along the way. That's always the job of an early stage community builder, is like, try a small thing, get feedback, help people feel bought into trying that thing. Don't, like, big launches do not go well. I mean, we saw like a lot of big, like dig.com is an example I go back to all the time. They would do these big launches of new features on their platform, and then their community would mutiny. So instead of doing that, get people bought into the actual process. It's also about, like, communities start with individual relationships, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but having about 10 founding members is enough to validate that you have a thing that's worth building out more from there. If you have 10 people who are willing to go on a journey of building something with you, then it's something you should keep doing. And with community, it's also all about consistency. So, like, doing the thing over and over and over again until it gains traction.
Yeah. So Chris runs a company that does, like, it's kind of a SaaS business that's self-service support for websites. You install, it's kind of like Intercom, but better. So if you were after, like, Chris, if you were trying to build, say, a community of, like, heads of support, so people who take care of support on websites, and you're looking to build a community of people who really, you want to connect these professionals together, you want them to swap ideas and to learn from each other. Super easy thing to do to start with, like you say, just testing the waters. Like, I would suggest, like Kerry said, something as simple as like a Slack community, or if you look at the way Culture Amp has really built, like, this people geek movement around, HR professionals, kind of like what CMX is doing as well, which is, taking this, like, profession and really, giving people something to be proud of and giving them something to march behind and a space for them to share and learn from each other. That can be just as simple as, just a really easy forum that you enable them to just connect with each other. And from there, you can scale that up into, like, meetups and summits and different things like that. But we can take it offline. I'll give you a bell after this, and I'll throw some ideas at you.
Yeah. Start simple is what I would say. Cool. I think we have one more question. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. From Angela. This is a long question. So, I've struggled. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go.
I've struggled a lot to show my team the value of community. The objective of our community is to appeal to a set of users who don't pay. Interesting. I work for a platform of freelancers and clients, and the freelancers don't pay. This community is for our freelancers, and it has shown to be very beneficial to the users. We went from 600 views and 2 posts to 2,400 views and 30 posts in around 7 months, for example. However, as they are not our main users and don't pay to keep our system, it's very hard to demonstrate how good and valuable it is. What advice can you give me to actually be able to showcase the value without the revenue impact? So here's the thing, like, revenue impact is one of many things that you can drive for a business. There's also cost savings, which to me seems like that's probably what's happening here, because these people are providing incredible value to the rest of the system. There's also, I mean, those are the two, like, high level business metrics that a CEO is, honestly, that's all CEOs really care about is, like, well, unless you're a B Corp, am I generating revenue or am I saving money? So at the end of the day, you got to answer one of those two, or am I having an impact on the world is another thing that's a nice to have. And if you're a B Corp, is actually necessary to have. But yeah, so I'm struggling to wrap my head around this whole large question right now. But I would be happy to also talk to you via email about this.
I think you answered that well. Like, I think that, that's just because it's such a new profession and new industry, it is, like, you've got to do a lot of educating. You've really got to constantly be, teaching the people around you what is valuable within a community, what you can pull out of it besides direct money. There's heaps of stuff. There's so much value in it. And then, after you, do that, like, that to me is the low hanging fruit. After you prove those things, so, we're saving money on support over, by having this forum, or we're saving money, on this education piece. Like, we don't have to do so much content around education because these people are helping each other. Like, once you prove that, that's the low hanging fruit. Then you start to, like, try and figure out how to draw a line between those people that were on the forum and those people that convert to becoming paid, like you were talking about before, Kerry. And that's when you start experimenting with programs, and you can start showing that, like, well, okay, we convert this many people and we can pull these levers to convert more of them. But I think that first step is the easy one for you to go out.
Yeah, I mean, in reading your question again, I do actually question, like, is this valuable? If these people aren't paying, are they bringing in paying customers? That would be my question, from the perspective of someone who runs a business and has to calculate ROI. Like, why should the company care about these free people who are getting resources from you? And yes, they're driving traffic, which is essentially just a vanity metric. I'm sorry, that's a little harsh. But are they actually driving any revenue for the rest of the system? And that's a question, like, if you can turn this into an ambassador program or a referral program in some way, perhaps, to bring on paying customers, or maybe prove that these people do end up becoming paying customers eventually, or, like I said before, provide value to paying customers, that's what you're going to have to calculate. Otherwise, like, if I'm running a business and I'm just providing all this free value to people who never will become paying customers, I am going to question. I'm probably going to cut that program off eventually.
Yeah.
And that's just the unfortunate truth. But I think that this is definitely possible for you to kind of pivot a little bit and change the way that you might be looking at it. So.
Cool.
All right. I think that's all of our questions. Is there anything else on Facebook? Are we good?
No, Facebook's good.
All right. I will let you get on with your Thursday, Joel. Thank you for joining us.
That's all right.
So much fun. And I hope everybody had plenty of time to think about where they want to go in their careers next. And I can't wait to see where you go.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. If anyone wants to talk offline, I'm just at Joel Connolly on Twitter, or I'll be at the CMX Summit this year, so we can meet IRL.
Yay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.